Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Foresight webinar series. We are glad to have you with us today. Our program for today is called Why Consider Total Rewards Optimization. I'm very pleased to have with me two fantastic speakers from Hewitt Associates. I'll take this opportunity to introduce our speakers for today's program and thank everyone for joining us. Our presenters today are Raymond Baumrock. He is principal with Hewitt Associates and senior consultant for the firm's research and insight practice, where he has led the development and research regarding many new innovations, including the Perceptions Index, Employee and Executive Management, and Hewitt's Employee Engagement Model. He is a contributing author to the Compensation Guide, HR Strategic Review, and World Span. He's also appeared on several television programs for CNBC, CNN, and Lifetime Network. I also have as a speaker with us today Tim Glowa, who is a lead consultant for employee research with Hewitt's Conjoint Offer. He's deeply experienced with the conjoint and preference measurement techniques. He's worked with several pioneers in the field of conjoint and has successfully conducted an exhaustive number of studies over the past decade in this arena. He has over a dozen years of market research experience, and he prides himself on turning research results into actionable insights that drive business results. Tim has published several articles on conjoint and has presented conjoint and its applications at numerous conferences in North America and throughout Europe. Please help me welcome our speakers, and Tim is going to kick things off today with an interesting poll for our audience.
Hello, thank you for attending. First off, I'd just like to get a sense of whether you agree or disagree with the following statement. In the next 12 months, we expect to increase our hiring. Would you strongly agree, slightly disagree, or strongly disagree with that statement?
And we'll give the folks in the audience about 30 seconds or so to complete and make their decisions about that whole question. And while we do that, I would like to remind the audience that the slides will be made available for the program after the broadcast via the website. So you will have the opportunity to receive the slides from today's program. Let's take a look and see how we're doing. It looks as though we still have a number of people still in progress getting ready to finish their response options there. So we'll give folks another just a couple of seconds to make that determination. And I think what we'll do now is we've closed our poll, so thank you for participating, and what we will do is share those poll results with everyone here on today's broadcast, so we can sort of use that as a framework to base our beginning of our program together. Shortly on the screen, everyone should have the opportunity to see those poll results now, which are very interesting. I've gotten a little bit of a preview to those, and those should be popping up just in a second for everyone.
No one.
Have you seen those poll results yet? I know I see them up here, and it's a pretty interesting breakout. It looks as though 45% of the audience says they slightly agree with the fact that they expect to increase their hiring over the next 12 months. And
I guess we could put that in the category of cautious optimism, perhaps.
I would call that as well, absolutely. We do have 18% who agree, 45% who slightly agree, and 16% are slightly disagreeing. So we're seeing everybody kind of right in the middle, as you say, cautiously optimistic.
Perfect. Can we go to the next slide?
Sure.
We've really seen that despite the recession, there has been some relatively strong competition, especially for critical talent. It's remained strong, and it's really starting to show some signs of improving. And this is really focused primarily on people who are college educated, and even more specifically, people who have highly technical skills, maybe in the fields of engineering or computer science or statistics or math or something like that. We're also expecting that at some point many companies are going to get back on board with hiring and that there will be a labor shortage as some of the baby boomers start to retire at some point in the next 10 or 15 years or so. So as we're thinking about this, or we're using this as a foundation for offering employees rewards, we want to make sure that we're doing so in a thoughtful way, that we are making a reward or offering a reward package that is attractive to employees, both from a retention and a recruitment perspective. As we think of a reward strategy, we really want to recognize 4 key elements to that strategy. Certainly there's external competitiveness, and I know Hewitt, just like many other HR consulting companies, can provide some metric or measurement around competitiveness. There's a financial consideration that we want to offer benefits and rewards in a cost-effective manner. There's an overriding talent or people strategy, the way that the organization wants to be perceived and the way that it wants to treat its people. And then there's also the employee preferences element, which is often one that's been overlooked. And we use the term preferences rather than perceptions, since those are very different. We don't really want to measure just satisfaction with rewards. We want to really deeply understand what employees are looking for, what they're specifically looking for out of a total rewards package. And that by blending all of those different criteria, an organization can create a very compelling total rewards strategy and package, one that will one that will recruit and keep its critical talent as well as all employees. As we've talked to clients in this area, they're really focusing, or they're really asking a lot of questions. What is the right package to be offering employees? What are the key drivers of preferences that employees have, and how do those preferences differ by any segment? However a segment is defined, whether it's gender, age, or salary range, or what about critical talent? What are high-performing employees looking for versus all others? We also know that many organizations are starting to realize that they're wasting money by offering benefits that employees may not value. How much is being wasted? And if we do need to make a change to a package of some sort, how are employees going to respond? Are they going to like this or not? And we really want to bring or use a tool called total rewards optimization that's using a technique that's been around in marketing for a long time called conjoint. And just to bring some data and some facts to the HR space to help organizations make better decisions about what reward elements and features we should be focusing on. As I mentioned, conjoint is the tool that we use to measure preferences. And we do this by looking at a trade-off situation for people. If we ask directly what's most important to you for anything, for either rewards or even let's take a step back and think about your daily life as you make decisions every day as to where to go to lunch or what computer to buy or what car to buy, in any of those situations you have to sort of make a trade-off. And that if we ask you directly what's most important, people will tell us everything. And that's really not all that actionable. So we use a tool called conjoint to measure some trade-offs so that we can infer what is most important to people. Here's a very simple example. If we have 2 different types of TV, a high-definition TV and a non-high-definition TV, and we offer that at 2 different price points, $500 and $1,500. That gives us 4 unique combinations. If we were to ask folks to put those in order of importance, from most preferred to least preferred, we could guess that the most attractive option would be the inexpensive, the $500 high-definition TV. The least attractive option would be the $1,500 non-high-definition TV. But what gets interesting is the trade-off between the second and third options. What becomes more important? Is it the price or is it the feature, the high definition? And that's really what we're trying to do in total rewards optimization is look at a range of different benefit and reward features and deeply understand the trade-offs that people are going to make as it relates to those different features. So our approach to do so is very simple, probably no different than a lot of other projects that people do. In the first step, we really want to deeply understand perceptions and for different reward options. And we do this with a very simple trade-off survey. Typically takes employees about 10 or 12 minutes long to complete it. And they go through a very simple trade-off exercise. That gives us the insight to learn what's really important to people, what's critical, what might be nice to have. And that allows us ultimately to design, deliver, communicate reward programs that meet the needs of employees. And when we start to bring in some of the cost data, we can also meet the financial needs of the organization. We think that's the optimal type of reward package, one that meets the needs of employees and also one that meets the financial and strategic needs of the organization. A classic win-win. Ray?
Thanks, Tim. So what are we really talking about here? As Tim had said, what we want to do is, for an organization, ultimately what we want to do is get the best bang for the buck, right? So we want to identify how can we deliver rewards, benefits and compensation rewards components that maximize appreciation and satisfaction but actually minimize cost, right? So especially for clients in the current economic environment, as we're looking at different things that we want to do, ultimately trying to stop wage and benefit inflation or get that trend down to something flatter, or in many clients' cases just trying to reduce it. How can we do that without actually disenfranchising our workforce so that as recovery comes and growth is the agenda, we don't lose all of that talent? So looking at this particular slide here, imagine that you as an organization have a current sort of benefit and compensation offering. And each of these lines represents one of those offerings, and the length of the line represents its cost in some way. You might think about the first line is your retirement benefits, the second is base pay, the third is bonus, and the next is maybe paid time off, and then health care or something like that. They could be any combination of those, and they have some sort of cost, and people have some view on that, whether it meets their needs or not, or how ideal it is for them. By going through this process, what we're doing is we're measuring the employee preferences using the preference measurement kind of approach. And what we can do is start to see, well, there might be an optimized offering for a particular employee or a particular group of employees where we actually increase our costs or add value to the first and the fifth component there, say maybe retirement and health care, and we actually maybe reduce some other areas, that second, third, and fourth bar, and actually that would be a more preferred situation, yet when we add up the costs that we added and the costs that we got away, we actually minimize or reduce the overall cost of the total rewards that we were delivering. So that's our outcome. That's what we're trying to get to, is to see, is there opportunities for that and amongst whom. So going to the next slide, what we really then are able to do is to say, okay, yes, for any given one employee, that's going to look a certain way, and for any group of employees. But now as we combine those that insight together, we start to see an opportunity where if we're measuring maybe 15 or 20 different components of total rewards, again, a component being base pay, variable pay, retirement, 401k, health care, all of those different components, and we're measuring multiple levels on all of those different things, the permutations or the numbers of possible combinations become well into the millions. But if we start to simplify that down and we say, okay, looking at this sort of grid here, and you have your existing total rewards package as it's designed today in that middle, so Plan A being the existing plan, all the different alternatives now, by building in the preferences and the cost, we can actually lay out all of those alternatives on a grid like this. And in many cases, not surprisingly, if you go kind of up and to the left, you see things like Plan C or elements like that would have higher costs and higher preferences, right? no big surprise there as we add cost and value to certain components that people would prefer those more. We see situations like Plan B, where at the same cost, by really shifting some of our dollars from current areas to some areas that are more highly desired, preferred, or valued, we can actually get higher preferences at a same cost curve. Now, what's really the sort of holy grail of the concept here and how this has played out for many of the organizations we're working with is finding opportunities more like Plan E. So really looking at not only are we producing higher preferences, so people prefer these sorts of opportunities and options more, but actually we're able to deliver those at a lower cost. And that's really what optimization is about, is looking basically at those things above the bar. How do we get maximized preference at a budget, a total rewards budget that we can afford, and in some cases where we might have to cut back. So if we go further, we always get the question, I think, on the next page, so do you really find these? And so here's a few examples of some of the situations that we've been able to be working on the past year or two here. A U.S.-based energy company actually identified in its first year savings of about $5 million, came out to be about a little over $1,000 per employee, and where 84% of the employees would prefer it relative to the current situation. So you can kind of look down these, and we're pretty consistently with where we've been able to apply this approach, been able to identify anywhere from $800 to $1,500 per employee in potential savings, yet have 70+% of the population prefer those outcomes relative to what they have currently. Now, of course, what about the other 30 or 20 or 30% who don't prefer something? Well, that's where segmentation becomes very important to us, and we have to look at, well, who are those people that wouldn't prefer it? If those are your high performers or your high potentials, or maybe members of a key role like sales force or of a key business unit you're looking to grow, that may not necessarily be the best strategy as it relates to your talent. Additionally, we've been able to apply this approach even to segments. So the last row down there for the global beverage company, where we really applied this only to the executive population. So in this case, 750 of the top executives across 7 different countries apply the same kind of approach. And here, of course, the savings per person or per executive certainly is much larger, but as a percentage is not too far off of what we see per employee in some organizations. So again, the cynic in all of us is that we're really able to find some of these things and achieve some of these areas. So far, our experience has been extremely positive around that. Okay, so maybe for all of you, what we've seen in the marketplace is probably half to maybe even a third of our organizations that come to us are looking for trying to cut operating costs and using this approach either to cut the costs per se or at least to cut the trend. So I'd just be curious from all of you on the conference today, as you look over the next 12 months, cutting operating costs, will it continue to be priority? Please let us know. Do you strongly agree with that? Agree, slightly disagree, or strongly agree? I think our experience so far has been this continues to be somewhat of a priority for people, but I'd like to hear from you. So go ahead and submit your responses, and then we'll take a look at what we see.
Great. While attendees are actually submitting their poll responses, I have a question that came in from the audience, and it's an interesting one. And the question is, are you seeing any dramatic changes in employee preferences as a result of our challenging economy right now?
Well, so I'll let Kim to chime in, but I'll give that a shot. So sure, I think we are seeing some shifts in terms of people valuing, and anytime we inject into an environment a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, security-type rewards become more apparent, become probably more valued. So things like the retirement plans that obviously matches have been cut, health care benefits that certainly are under some stress given the legislation and so forth. So we are seeing some preferences shift to those, but you also see some trends continue. Things like base pay and variable pay. The ability to put food on the table certainly becomes a high priority. Tim, is there anything you had?
Yeah, I think the only other one we did see earlier that employee stock purchase plans were a relatively inexpensive but highly valued option for many employees, especially people making say $50,000 a year or more. We've really seen that element take a bit of a hit as the economy has slowed down a little bit. I'm not sure if you're seeing the same trend in your stock purchase plans, if it's just a decline in enrollment or not. But we've really seen that feature, for instance, become less attractive to people.
Thank you. Again, we've got our poll results available for everybody now, and it's pretty interesting. Everyone should be able to see those poll results.
Right. So we've got about, looks like about almost 2/3 there in the strongly agree, or at least 3/5, and then a quarter in that slightly agree. So pretty similar to what we're certainly seeing amongst many of our clients is that, operating expenses and compensation benefits being an expense in the accounting world continues to be a priority. This kind of approach and applying these types of analytics tends to be a very valued commodity in those kinds of situations. Okay, so let's move on. Ultimately, the idea here is by bringing in preferences, by bringing in the costs, by looking at the competitive metrics, and by bringing all of these analytics together, we're able to make a bit more intelligent decisions related to what can be done to cut operating expenses in the total rewards area. We're going to show you some examples in a second of kind of a dashboard, but what we are able to do now with some of the technology and some of the algorithms that we have available to us is to bring those preferences and costs together and actually simulate change. So right off the bat, we get some great metrics, which is the relative importance, right? So this is a very typical kind of situation where we can now identify which attributes within the total rewards package are most important and by how much. Which ones would people trade off and how much would they be willing to trade off each one for. What we'll also get is what we call a money down the drain index, which is how much of the cost, the total cost of our total rewards is actually valued at that level. So a money down the drain index would show, gee, we're paying out, let's say, $100 for any particular set, yet it's valued at only $80, right? So the money down the drain there would be $20, right? The difference between those kinds of things. Now, again, what we've been seeing pretty consistently across organizations is anywhere from $800 or $900 up to $1,500 to $2,000 per employee being, quote, money down the drain or somewhat wasted there. We're also, as I said, able to look at this preference and cost optimization. We'll see that in a second. But probably what's, as you well know, is in both the HR and the marketing world, segmentation matters. So looking at the whole population is interesting, intellectually interesting about what can happen. But in terms of different demographics or different attitudinal segments, are we able to then apply some changes and some intelligence, probably with greater effect and greater power? So if we go to the next page, let me just kind of show you what this might look like. And this is just a screenshot of our interactive dashboard, where what's happened here is we've taken all of the different elements that were measured in a particular study. Again, an element, base pay being one element, variable pay being another, healthcare being another, etc. And each of these dots on this cloud grid here represents some permutation of all of those different elements that were tested. Along the y-axis there, the vertical axis, is the percentage of employees who would prefer this plan relative to the current plan. So here we're only showing actually those situations or those alternatives that have at least 90% of the employees preferring this plan to the current. And then along the bottom there is actually the cost savings that would be generated. So we've highlighted here just sort of one particular permutation of the plan that actually would be preferred by nearly all employees that it's about the same cost as they're delivering now. So in essence, this is a cost-neutral situation, is that by moving to this in some way, you actually would improve perceptions, right? So people would actually prefer the situation more so, but your total cost actually has not changed dramatically. Now, what you'll also see there is that those costs don't take into account the change management. And I think all of us who've been in business long enough know that with any change comes cost. So in essence, to communicate changes and to administer those changes and to actually put all of those things into place, there's some cost, and this doesn't take that into account. Right now, these kind of costs are purely the costs delivered from the design of the benefit or compensation plan, or in some cases, the delivery aspects of it. If you go to the next one, what you see is there's also a dot that, well, here if we were really looking for cost savings, right, here's an opportunity that would save $16 million, and again, that's sort of the idealized cost. It would be somewhat south of that number because you'd have to pay some amount of money from your change management kinds of costs. But in essence, an order of magnitude of 15 to 20 million, that would actually still be preferred by 91+% of the employees. And I also want to be transparent and honest and authentic with everyone on the call too, is that 91% really represents everyone who would be even slightly positive, like even just a little bit more preferred this option relative to the current. So we also have some metrics that actually measure the intensity of the preference. So we can start to predict, well, what percentage of the population would really, intensely prefer these situations relative to be, just slightly in that. So we have the opportunity, obviously, to look at those metrics at various levels and at various opportunities to give people an idea of what might go on. So on the next slide is sort of the end game here, right? So understanding the economics and appeal of program changes across different segments. So, for example, we might have this current plan that here shows a retirement match, 401k match of about 4%, 4 weeks vacation, no life insurance. And then we see an alternative here that actually raises the match, but reduces PTO, changes some things around the health care. So instead of a $15 copay for a doctor visit, it's $30 and $30 for a specialist versus $60, etc. And you might save $50 million in this kind of example for a large organization. By breaking that out then by segment too, we can start to understand, well, gee, for segment 1, which who knows what that might be, we see alternative 1 actually a bit less preferred, yet for segment 3, it's extremely better. And if segment 3 is a particularly valuable segment for us, certainly going from the current plan to alternative 1 is going to deliver significant opportunity in an attraction and retention opportunity. So again, looking at it by segment becomes a very critical piece to this puzzle. Okay, so because all of these things are meant to produce a better level of attraction, retention, and then the requisite productivity, I'd just be curious about everybody on the call in terms of your concern about retaining high-performing or critical talent. So same scale as we had before. If you could just submit your answer here. I am concerned about retaining high-performing or critical talent, especially as the recession comes to an end. So please go ahead and submit your answers, and we'll take a look at what we've got.
That sounds great. So all of you should have your poll up and and running for you right now. You'll take a moment and respond to the poll question, which is, I am concerned about retaining high-performing or critical talent, especially as the recession comes to an end. And, you know, it's funny, I see more and more articles coming out in various HR publications around this particular concern, and so I'll be really interested to see what the results are today, because we are seeing, you know, time and time again, concern now as people are coming out of the recession. How might they make sure they hang on to and retain the critical talent rolling forward?
Yeah, I think, Christy, you know, we're really seeing, you know, as the conversation turns from, you know, sort of crisis and survival to what does the future look like and how might we, you know, see the organization stabilizing and then, you know, really returning to growth. And I don't mean returning to, you know, exuberant growth, but returning to a strategy about how do our businesses grow effectively. You know, many of the things that our organizations have been doing, you know, is going to have the opposite effect, where the, you know, talent is really going to be looking to, you know, to grow as well, and perhaps grow with other organizations who have done a better job of engaging and retaining that talent. So this has become quite an issue for many of our clients right now.
That's right. I know our poll has ended, so I want to thank everyone who's listening today for participating in the poll, and we should be popping up those responses shortly for everyone to take a look at. And I think it will be not surprised. I would think that we'll see that, you know, it is a concern for folks, and it absolutely is if you look at those poll results.
Yeah, it really, actually, this is probably a little stronger than we might even see, you know, in the general marketplace, and maybe to some extent we have a little bit of a biased sample, I guess, for people who would be interested in this topic. You know, clearly the concern tends to be a little higher. So to some extent, you know, that's good to see, and I think that's truly the case. Again, even as we look at unemployment levels amongst some of the, you know, most skilled, most educated talent, I mean, that's still well south of 5%. You know, half of what the overall unemployment rates are. And the competition for that talent, I think, is going to intensify as the economy recovers a bit versus lag at all. Now, before I turn it over to Tim, I don't know, Christy, if there's any other questions that have come in that we can address. Otherwise, I'll turn it to Tim to kind of walk us through our approach in a little bit more detail and go from there.
That sounds great. We don't have any questions at this time, but I do want to let individuals know that if you would like to ask our presenters a question, they're happy to take questions today throughout the program. Please utilize either the chat or the Q&A panel and send those questions in, and we'll make sure that Tim and Ray have an opportunity to respond to those today. But at this point, I think we'll go ahead and roll forward with Tim, who will continue on talking a little bit more about the approach to producing total reward optimization.
Perfect. Tim? As I mentioned, we measure preferences with a very simple survey, and I'll show a screenshot of what that looks like on the next slide. But as as an employee completes the survey, we really start to adapt the questions that they see on one screen, based on the input that they see on one screen. We start to adapt the questions that we're going to be asking them on the subsequent screens. This really produces a very engaging and relevant survey experience, because we're not asking a bunch of redundant, overlapping questions. It also allows us to really shorten the overall time, both for the survey, the amount of time that the employee is using to complete the survey, typically is in about 10 or 12 minutes. And we're also, since we're able to look at those responses that an employee is giving us, we actually do the modeling in real time. And as we, in the dashboard that Ray showed you a few moments ago, we're actually able to look at that pretty much in real time. Literally hours after the start of data collection, we can start to look at what is most important to people and how those preferences might vary by any segment or group of segments. Next slide. The survey itself really doesn't look or feel like any normal survey. It's very engaging. It can be customized to a client's branding requirements. There is a demo site there that you can go out, www.totalrewardsdemo.com. You can just take a simple survey. It's very short. I think it has about 5 different features being tested, but you can go out there and see for yourself what the survey looks like and how it feels. We do measure preferences in 3 stages. The first part of the survey is pretty broad. We ask for preferences and sensitivity to a range of different benefit and reward options. And the second stage, which is in the bottom left-hand corner there, we want to start to understand how important different reward elements are across, or how they compare across different reward features. Which ones really are critical, which ones might be less so. And then in the third and final stage, we present people with some very difficult trade-off scenarios where they have to pick option A or option B. They're really not able to have everything. They have to really weigh in their mind which of those items are most or least important to them, and by how much. So at the end of it, we're able to really get a very good understanding of employee preferences, and then also able to include any other segmentation or other demographic characteristics. As we're thinking about what we want to test, there's really almost 3 different options for a client. One is to sort of go on the one side, on the left side there, and to focus broadly on total rewards, but not to dive all that deep on any one topic. So we might have healthcare and paid time off and perhaps recognition or life insurance and advancement and career development and training and so on. The other option is to go really and target any one particular feature, either healthcare or retirement, and just pick the 15 or 20 different attributes, all within that one content area. And that would really give us a great understanding and a great ability to optimize, say, healthcare. If we looked at just all the different characteristics, all the different features that make up a healthcare package. But that comes at the expense of not being able to optimize across different packages. The most common application, the most common discussion that we have with clients is kind of in the middle. We're really focused on a lot of the core kind of benefits and comp things, healthcare, paid time off, retirement, base pay, short and long-term incentives, dental, and just really get a good handle on the things that really ultimately drive most of the expenses. But I think that it should be noted that this is flexible. We can really focus as narrowly or as broadly as we like, and really only address the features that are most critical to clients and things that they would practically want to execute against. As we've thought about what we're trying to accomplish with the total rewards optimization, we've really heard from a lot of clients that they're looking for something that's fast, that the analysis and the overall survey time is quick. Really want something that's engaging, relatively short survey that gets people involved and that they really want to continue to complete the survey. Maybe they might even learn a little bit more about their benefit package as a result of doing that. Certainly the accuracy and the quality of the data needs to be state-of-the-art, and we want our colleagues as well as our clients to have complete confidence in the results, and that's, I think, what we've accomplished here. It also needs to be cost-effective. It needs to be we need to be able to offer this service at a price point that clients can recognize a very strong return on investment for the cost of the project, and that's certainly something we've been able to accomplish very easily. As you think about looking at one of these surveys, or a survey like this, there's just some best practices and some potential pitfalls that we wanted to share with you as we're wrapping this up. Certainly from a best practice perspective, we really only want to test those features that you would practically consider executing against. One of the biggest concerns, one of the first questions many clients ask is, how are we managing employee expectations? If we show them an option where we might be testing or might be offering company cars? Are we going to raise the expectation that we're going to actually offer company cars? And our suggestion here is that we really should only test those things where we would actually execute against it. That's related to the second topic as well. There's a tendency when we're doing surveys that we just want to keep adding a few more questions or a few more features in there, and we really want to urge clients to stay away from that, to keep the survey focused and don't include everything in the kitchen sink in there. The survey and the whole survey process is also can be very effectively positioned as a communication tool, both to help employees understand what their benefits are, but also, I think more importantly, to signal to employees that they really their opinions are valued and that we want to hear from them. It also helps if we have a range of different colleagues from a client organization involved, from HR, finance, IT, and certainly have the senior leadership and support and buy-in to make the initiative successful. The last couple there, prepare and how you're going to use the results so that you're prepared and you proactively know what questions we're trying to address and what questions we're trying to answer, rather than just using this as perhaps an exploratory tool. Survey key segments on a regular basis, either with a reward study or just a regular questionnaire, just to make sure that your initiatives are having the impact that you're looking for. And most importantly, with all of these, is resist the temptation to boil the ocean, to keep it very tactical and very focused, and answer the questions that are most relevant to you. One of the challenges, and you probably even saw that in the screenshots that Ray was mentioning, is that there's an awful lot of data. Conjoint just produces a tremendous amount of data. We really just want to use it in a very strategic way to answer our critical questions. There's no way that we can look at every single combination of features. We just want to use it just to answer the questions that we need addressed. Some pitfalls, and I'll just cover these quite quickly. Certainly look at the preferences only and ignore the costs. We've had a few instances where clients have wanted to do that, and that's almost like giving you the opportunity to build the $20,000 Ferrari. Just by ignoring the cost element there, it really takes away a good portion of the power behind this. Certainly recognize that longer surveys, anything that's over 20 or 21 minutes, really has a decreased data quality from a respondent. We start to lose a lot of people. The consistency of the responses starts to diminish. So we really want to keep the survey as focused and as short as possible. We also want to avoid trying to inflate some of the cost savings by making some dubious linkages to engagement or retention or something like that. It often seems in many cases that when we design a conjoint in partnership with a client, that 80% of the time or 70% of the development time might be on the non-conjoint questions, which are still rich and valuable, but we really need to shift that and focus mostly on the conjoint elements. I think recognize that there's a lot of different approaches to conjoint, and that not all of these are created equal. So if this is an approach that you're looking at or considering, certainly do some research and talk to some clients or other people who may have used this, just to make sure that you're using the appropriate conjoint technique to address your specific circumstances. I think related to that, just be careful about placing too much emphasis on any competitive or normative preference data, since many organizations, the preferences across an industry might be very different than the preferences of your individual employees. And I think that's probably about all that we wanted to cover today, and I see that there's some questions.
There absolutely are some questions coming in from the audience, and there's some really interesting questions. So let me ask you gentlemen, the first question here is, and that one is the question coming from Joseph, who says, I know that each company is different, but what have you found in some of your surveys that seem to be a particular must-have in terms of rewards?
Yeah, and I think we really do have every single survey that we have conducted is addressed, designed just to address the specific needs of clients. So they're really, every survey is different. Sometimes you focus just on health, sometimes you focus just on broader total rewards, sometimes you focus on benefits and comp. But I think consistently we've seen that there really is an opportunity to invest in some relatively inexpensive but relatively high-valued features to create a win for employees. Maybe something like increasing the dental coverage or increasing short or long-term disability. Those are consistently things that we've seen in several studies. Ray, anything to add there?
No, I would agree. I think, in terms of, must-haves from an employee's perspective, obviously, the major benefits and the major elements of pay have to be there, right? So those, I think, are pretty consistent. But no, I think, Tim, we've seen that pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let me ask a question then. That's coming from another audience member named Yelena, and she knows that preferences change over time. So how often do you recommend undergoing this sort of assessment for an organization? Because, you have turnover and new employees come on board and that sort of thing. So what are your thoughts around that?
I'll go ahead and take that one. So being in the business that we're in, I would probably do it weekly, but perhaps maybe more so is I think what we've found right now is that maybe annually to maybe every other year, but I think we've been finding is that clients almost are looking at sort of a horizon when it comes to total rewards, because they don't want to do lots of dramatic shifting, like cut and add and then cut and add and keep doing that on a constant basis. So what I think we're seeing, and I think we're starting to advise clients, is to say, you may want to in one particular year kind of take a total comp and benefits or a total rewards approach and kind of get sort of the broad picture of that. And then, in the next year, you might actually focus in a particular area that you are contemplating more significant change or trying to understand more of the trade-offs. So maybe in that year, you really are focused in getting more depth around your health care or around retirement or around incentive-based pay, because that's an area that you either have competitively or cost-wise have come out of whack, perhaps. So I think, there's probably an annual approach here, but the scope of it, I think, changes kind of as the strategies play themselves out.
I think just adding to that as well, the preference data, although it does change a little bit over time and given kind of some external impacts such as the recession, the preference data still is remarkably stable from one month to another, or one quarter to another. I think certainly if you're starting to look at some data that might be 3, 4, 5 years old, it might be time to refresh it. But it is a very prescriptive type tool. And it does, and by being prescriptive, it then does have a fairly good shelf life. I think the other, outside of some external shifts that might impact preferences, I think the other ones that might cause an organization to rethink and re-examine and retest could be a change in people's strategy or just an overall change in the type of people that they're looking for. Maybe there's been a big some employees are starting to leave or turnover starting to increase, or maybe some competitors are getting more aggressive and offering some state-of-the-art reward features that you may not have considered testing. And you can use this as a way to kind of test if that's going to make sense and resonate with your employees. So there's a lot of different shiftings that may impact and ultimately determine if you need to refresh the study or not.
Great. I want to follow up with another question related to those employee populations, and how much disparity have you seen at all between the hourly, part-time, or full-time workers and those salary workers?
This one really varies a lot, also based on the organization and the type of employee or the type of business that they're in. In some cases, some segments are very similar, as almost as what we would expect. But in some cases, it can be very different. So there's no one answer there. We often see, in many cases, a bigger split rather than based on full-time or part-time. It's kind of correlated to that, but is more, in many cases, it may be a bigger predictor of preferences is salary and total salary level. And in that case, just as really not expected, as salaries start to increase, people are really looking for something dramatically different than perhaps people on a lower salary, where they're just really making sure that they can maximize the amount of cash that they're keeping in their pockets every day.
Great, thanks. And the next question is coming from Tamara in the audience, and she says, due to the economy, it seems that employees are starting to feel like all their needs are not being met. How do you balance it when, the lacking needs and they've got budget dollars available, to address your employee population accordingly?
Well, so I think that's a challenge. I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but I think what we've also been finding is that just as employees are, around the kitchen table with their spouses and families are, sort of making different trade-offs in their lives as the economy challenges their way of life and how they fund it, so too are the companies, and I think those organizations who have done a better job of being open, transparent, and inviting in their situations. So we've applied this kind of methodology to lots of different organizations, and many of them are doing it in a way of saying, hey, you know what, we've got these challenges as a business, you have these kinds of challenges as employees, let's get your input and invite you into this conversation about how can we deliver what's most valuable to you at this time, knowing that, in all of our lives we do have some of those shifts over time. So I think it's a challenge. I don't think there's a silver bullet to that answer, but you get a tremendous amount of opportunity as an organization to start to engage employees into the rewards conversation, as opposed to something we give you or do to you. It's something you can participate in and help us understand, so that what we're delivering for however much money we have to spend on these things can be done most effectively.
Great. The next question coming in is interesting as well. What have you found in regards to voluntary benefits or EAP programs in terms of the research that you're conducting?
Well, I'll take a first shot at that. Tim, you may have some specific examples there. So the value of voluntary benefits and sort of their preference curves, perhaps, has a lot to do with the utilization of them. So, one sort of point of encouragement I would give to all organizations is, getting people to use more of their voluntary benefits gives you a larger opportunity to trade off value in them, because people who use those tend to value them above and beyond the cost that they are to deliver. And again, I'm talking about the typical sort of voluntary benefits or EAPs or things like that aren't particularly expensive for the organization to deliver. Yet, when people use them, actually are perceived to have pretty strong value. Tim, I don't know.
I think that's a great summary. We often see with some of those voluntary benefits that the perceived value often exceeds the total cost by maybe a factor of 2 or 3 to 1. They're relatively inexpensive, yet the value that they give to employees can be quite high. It's also it's sometimes one of those comfort benefits that you may not be a frequent user of it, but it's comforting knowing that it's there just in case you may need it. It's even higher, the perceived value is even higher among those who actually do use it.
Right. Yes, and that key then, again, being people need to know it's there, so awareness, so communication, marketing around those kinds of things, and getting people to use it has a much bigger. If people don't know it's there and don't use it, pretty much they value it zero. So that'd be my encouragement around that.
That sounds great. And that's all the time we have for today's program for the questions. Thanks to everyone in the audience for participating in the polls today and also for asking some excellent questions of our speakers, Ray and Tim. And thanks especially to Tim and Ray with Hewitt Associates for this engaging discussion today on considering total rewards optimization as part of your human resources strategy. For those of you that are participating in looking for credits for today's program, the HRCI certification approval information is now displayed on your computer screens. The HRCI program approval number is 56551. That's 56551. We hope that you enjoyed today's program and that you consider joining us again as part of the Foresight Connection webinar series. Coming up in December, we are focusing on what makes an organization a best employer. I'm going to share some really interesting highlights of some global research around high-performing organizations and best employers. And I think you'll find the research just absolutely fascinating from a global perspective. And that's coming up on December 9th, and we hope that you will have the opportunity to come join us again for that broadcast. To register, you just simply visit the website details there. Also, for those of you that are participating today, you will receive an email, a follow-up with these slides from today's program, and opportunities for you to provide feedback to us on what topics you'd like to see rolling forward as we're building our 2010 or 2010 webinar series for the Foresight Connection. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate everyone's involvement, and thank you so much again to Ray and Tim for this important topic. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.